I want to discuss the LA Kings because I think of the teams in the Western Conference as we know it before we find out what next season is going to look like, right? I think they might be one of the most interesting teams in the West because there's a lot of young kids coming in. And there's going to be this whole crunch of these players coming in, and who's going to play where could very well decide just how good things are going to get for the Kings. If the veterans are still around to help guide these kids when this team gets good, look out. This rebuild, I think, is kind of sort of done. And I say kind of sort of done because I don't think we're going to see any need for further top draft picks. They may very well end up getting another top 5 draft pick, but they don't need it. So when you're looking at their depth chart, it's really all over the place. Let's look at just the left side. Just the left side. And I've moved Turcotte to the left side because I couldn't figure where to put him at center. Maybe you put him on the right side. You know what? Yeah, well, just pretend he's on the left or the right. There's plenty of guys here that could be on the left or the right. It's just great to look at their wing. So Iafallo and Kempe are likely the top 2. But again, Turcotte, if he comes in and he's as good as he's supposed to be, he's going to push for top 6 time. And down the middle is going to be really interesting too. So you got Trevor Moore there as well from Toronto. Anderson Dolan. Kaliev. Is Kaliev going to be ready? Elias Anderson, they didn't bring him in, so he'll be a 13th forward, right? They brought him in so he can play. And then there's Grundstrom, and Grundstrom's been pretty solid. So that's just one side of the forward group. Down the middle, Kopitar, Velarde. Velarde played very well after being called up. So for all the comments about, oh, Shannon thought Velarde was going to be good, LOL, I think this season the LOLs are going to transfer back to me because I think Velarde's excellent. And now that he's healthy, knock on wood, right? As long as he stays healthy, I think they've got a really solid forward. But Byfield could very well be the second line center. Now, I've put him on the third because sure. But again, you got Turcotte, you got Byfield, you got Velarde. These are all good young prospects. Lazat's solid. Amadio can play on the wing as well. Maybe Lazat ends up on the wing. I don't know. Kupari, they've got Kupari coming in, and then there's Tyler Madden, the one that Canuck fans are, in some cases, very upset that we lost in the Toffoli deal. So if Madden's ready, and it's not going to be ready for this year, but it does add an interesting wrinkle to this group. And then Akil Thomas, if he comes in and he's ready as well. Holy crap. There's so many good young forwards for the Kings. And then on the right, you've got Brown, you've got Ferk. Now, Ferk would not be top 6 anywhere but here because Ferk and Velarde had this incredible chemistry right out of the gate. So, yeah. Jeff Carter, Austin Wagner, and Matt Luff. And again, any of these other guys here could move over to another wing. And I gave up. I was like, there's too many guys here who may very well push their way into jobs. Now, it's an interesting situation. I always talk about how it's nice to have a team that has enough veteran forwards that none of the rookies have to make it in order for it to be a successful season. Now, the Kings don't really have a group of 12 forwards that you look at and say, all right, if all the veterans, if those 12 veterans are your starting guys, you can be competitive. But while they've got room for the rookies to come in, they've got open spots for rookies to come in, there are so many highly thought of prospects who are all going to be competing for those jobs. It could be an excellent situation. So the Kings, who have $13.6 million in cap space currently, think about it. Just think about it. All these young kids coming in means you end up with a bunch of cap space, and they could add. They're still in a position to add. Just imagine if they said, sure, Hoffman. And then they sign Hoffman and they add him to this group. Just think of it. And then you could have Hoffman on the wing, and yeah. So while we can look and say, well, Iafallo's probably not a first liner on a contending team. Kempe's been, on and off, not too bad. Ferk probably not going to be able to do over a full season what he did during that great run just before the pause. But there's enough interesting names here that the Kings could be absolutely fascinating to watch in 2020, 2021. And then we get to the blue line, where you've got Mata, who was added, Doughty, Anderson, that's Mikey Anderson, Joey's brother, and Matt Roy. Clegg, Walker. Now, I like Sean Walker. I think Sean Walker's solid. Bjorn Fote, I thought looked decent, and I think he gets a spot this year. So Bjorn Fote, I think probably ends up top 4, adding another guy in an entry-level contract to this team, and another really good solid player. And then there's McDermott, who can drop the gloves, and you've got Sean Dursey still there as your depth. They could sign a player. They could go out. They could get Hamonic. They could go out and get Hamonic. Throw Hamonic onto this blue line. Could get better really quickly. And so for me, the Kings, a team I've never cheered for, and I have to admit this is the most exciting young group they've had since Doughty and Kopitar were coming up. Since Brown was one of the better young forwards in the game. And this group they have coming up, I think, is more exciting, because you do have in Turcotte and Byfield especially, you have guys who could potentially be game changers for the Kings, and that's not even counting that if Elias Anderson turns things around for the Kings, they're great. But again, this is why picking up Anderson is a no risk situation for the Kings. If Anderson doesn't work out and he ends up in the AHL, no harm, no foul. They're fine. So and I'm going to keep coming back to the forward group, because this is going to be fascinating to watch how this settles out. This is going to be one of those teams that I'm watching right out of training camp. And then in net, I've been a big fan of Cal Peterson's. Watched him play when we went to Vegas. We watched the Golden Knights against the Kings, and Peterson's just fantastic. And I think this goaltender is going to be really good. So we look at goaltenders who could be a top 10 in the NHL, say 5 years from now. I would have Cal Peterson in that group. The interesting thing is, so I think he takes over for Jonathan Quick this year. When Jonathan Quick first came into the league, there wasn't any hype about Jonathan Quick. He was a good prospect. He was okay. He was good. But right out of the gate with Quick, I thought, this guy's a pretty good goaltender. And yet there wasn't a lot of hype until all of a sudden 2012, there was a ton of it. And Peterson, to me, seems similar in that he was seen as, yep, this is going to be the starter for the Kings. He's going to be the guy. But the ceiling, they didn't talk about, he was going to be that great or anything. But I really think Peterson is capable. I think Cal Peterson is capable of being an excellent goaltender. And then their number 3 right now is Villalta. And whether or not he ends up being the backup at some point or what happens. It's interesting because a year ago at this time, we're talking about how the Jonathan Quick contract isn't great. The Kings probably want to move on from that. They'd probably keep Jack Campbell, and they'd have Campbell and Peterson as their goaltenders. Instead, Campbell goes to Toronto, and they keep Quick. And in all likelihood, it's a contract that other teams probably shied away from. Much like in Vegas with Marc-Andre Fleury, where other teams just didn't want to take on that cap hit. And while that was a situation, was still a thing last year, this year it's going to be a lot worse because you've got the flat cap and a lot of teams that are already strapped out. And the Kings aren't. So for a Kings team that I think is already exciting, that already has a forward group that should be just fascinating, a defense that should be better than I think people are going to give it credit for, goaltending that's better than people are going to give it credit for, they're going to be one to watch. They're absolutely going to be one to watch. And I don't know how many games they win, but I think of the 3 teams in California, the future's the brightest for the Kings. And I think their 2020-2021 could be the most exciting of the 3 as well. They won, 9 of 11 going into the pause. They looked really, really good. And so I really think that the team that went on that run, this roster's going to have a lot of those guys that were on that run that really believe they could do something. If the NHL had made it a 31-team playoff, the Kings are a team that felt that they could do some damage should that happen. I think Doughty takes more criticism than he should over this past, I'll say, year and a half. The team around him just isn't very good, and I think that's reflected on him somewhat. I'm not saying that he's still like one of the top 3 defensemen in the game, but I think that people who are writing him off and saying he's not very good, I think they're in for a rude awakening once we get into next season. I still think Doughty's one of the best defensemen in the game, as my top 20 defensemen showed. I do not have him where I used to, but I still have him in the top 20 defensemen. And I think with a better team overall, you'll see Doughty's numbers come up. The interesting thing to me is going to be Kopitar. Kopitar, he's had up seasons, down seasons. In terms of his overall stats, last year was kind of a down year for him, kind of, sort of. But he's still capable of a bounce back. And if he bounces back, if he can get back to, a point a game, maybe a little bit above, this team could be far more dangerous than I think they're given credit for. This is going to be, one of those things where if we don't, let's just say we don't have a 2021 season, this is a team that could benefit from that. You get them all into camp, you get them all started up, and then next year we'd have a draft that you got to think would be weighted in favor of teams like the Kings that have been near the bottom of the league. So they'd probably still get a top 10, top 5 draft pick. And then they're picking up another good player out of what is a pretty deep draft in 2021, in all likelihood anyways. The draft's going to be affected by what we're going through and all the shutdowns too. But this could be fascinating. So this is the most excited I've been about what the Kings look like probably ever, to be honest. Closest I could get is I remember back in, I want to say it was 2009 that I was watching NHL Center Ice, and I was trying to watch as many different games as I could because they had a free trial. And I said to guys at work, I said, I keep watching Kings games, and I'm not sure why. But I get the feeling that team's going to win a cup at some point. And I got a lot of, what? No, they won't. And so it's a shame I didn't have a channel at that point because, man, they were a lot of fun to watch with Doughty, with Kopitar, and with the guys that were coming up. And I want to say, I think might have been 2010. I'm trying to remember what year it was. All I remember was being very impressed with the Kings, and I get the impression this year could be very impressive as well. There could be some lopsided losses when you've got a bunch of kids coming into the lineup. You can have rough nights, but when this starts to click, I think you're going to see glimpses of what this team could be, and I think the Kings are on the right track. This is where the Senators want to end up too, where they have all these guys in there. You've got veterans that are holding it all together. Your goaltending looks really solid, and the future looks really bright. So while I would put the Kings ahead of the Senators, this is, I think, where the Senators want to be next year. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. As always, Kings, dark horses in the West, or need at least another year? I'm on the fence on that one. I think again, if Byfield comes in and he's the real deal, Turcotte comes in, he's the real deal, and if there's some chemistry between some of these kids, if Velarde can stay healthy, I think they could surprise some people. Let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.